UF got a big commitment and had a whole bunch of blue chips on campus this weekend as recruiting looks like it is about to take off. We've got Gators Online Corey Bender on today to chat about some of these targets. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. UF got a commitment today. Tell me a little bit about Josiah Davis.
Yeah, so he's a do-it-all athlete for his high school. Florida likes him at safety, but very productive. He had 22 touchdowns as a junior. 7 of those were kickoff return touchdowns. So he's a guy, if he does come up with an interception, very dynamic with the ball. A kid's kind of under the radar. A lot of people didn't have him ranked in recent weeks. That's all kind of changed. Tennessee, Kentucky, Louisville. Those are some of the other schools that kind of offered him as well as Florida. So I think it's a guy that, he's going to keep kind of going up the rankings. He's a guy that a lot of people didn't really know in a smaller classification. So I think over time he kind of gets out in camps. That's the other thing, too. He's not a kid that's hit the camp circuit too hard. So I think he's a guy we'll become more and more familiar with as we enter the fall and the summer. So a really talented kid, good size at 6'1", 185. A lot of upside too. So I think it's a good get. I think it's a kid that you want kids that want to be in this class that waste no time sitting on the offers and taking visits. This kid wanted to be a Gator from the start, and they got that kid. So I think it's a good pickup for Florida.
All right, let's talk about some of the visitors that were on campus this weekend. Again, let's start big here. The Jeremiah Smith, he was on campus late last week. He's an Ohio State commit. Do you think maybe he's not as solid to Ohio State as maybe the Buckeyes would like? And he's been kind of on a visit tour lately.
I think his commitment's still very solid. I think he's going to take his visits just in case. The big thing is Brian Hartline and Ryan Day. As long as they're at Ohio State, I just have a hard time thinking he's going to flip. But he's doing his due diligence. He's taking visits just to be on the safe side. Georgia got him on campus, like you said, and then Florida as well. It's going to be interesting. They have DJ Lagway, who's like the main recruit in for his class, 5-star kid, and even Jeremiah Smith said too. You always want that elite quarterback in your class, and Florida has that. So I think Florida definitely picked up a lot of ground. I mean, Florida's kind of been looking as an afterthought for Jeremiah Smith.
Sure.
Before when they had Kerry Colbert, he was definitely going to take an official visit. Once actually he left for the Denver Broncos, everything was kind of put on hold. Now they have Billy Gonzalez, so those are some really strong first meetings they had over the weekend. But DJ Lagway's in his ear as well. I think the biggest thing for Florida right now is they have to get an official visit. I think they may have some ground, but the next step they got to get him for an official. And I'm sure if that happens, DJ's going to probably fly back in town for that as well. They have him every time they have a big visitor on campus. They try to get him on campus. So it's kind of a wait and see, but Florida definitely did a good job.
You mentioned Billy Gonzalez in there. What kind of impact could he potentially have on this recruitment? I know, you mentioned Hartline, and obviously that's a big name, but Gonzalez has done a great job for a very large number of years putting players in the NFL.
Yeah, the proof's in the pudding with him. I mean, you have Percy Harvin, you have a countless amount of guys. Even about 3 or 4 years ago, there's about 3 or 4 guys in that team that win the NFL. They're all wide receivers. So I think with Florida, I think with Billy Gonzalez, a lot of kids right now weren't too familiar with him just because he was on the last staff and kind of took a break and went to other schools. But I think as they did their research, they're like, wow, this guy has a really good resume.
Right.
A lot of proven guys on that list, and Percy Harvin's the one that sticks out. A lot of these kids love Percy. They kind of mention him in interviews as guys that kind of try to model their game after. So I
Sure.
think over long term, I think it's just about meeting him, kind of having that FaceTime and building the relationship. But I think the one thing you cannot deny with Billy Gonzalez is the resume, and I think that's what a lot of kids are excited about.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely develops talent. And you mentioned DJ Lagway coming into town for this visit. And I mean, he's so impressive, right? Like, you can add recruiting coordinator to his resume. It takes a pretty special guy to get on a plane and come here and really like put in the effort. He wants a really highly rated class.
And that's even before he committed. Before he committed to Florida, when he was still considering about 5 or 6 schools, he said, "Hey, I want to commit here soon because I want to start building that top recruiting class."
Right.
That's my biggest thing. The longer I wait, maybe some other receivers or offensive playmakers are kind of waiting on the quarterback. Let me make that decision when I'm ready, and let me start recruiting. And he's really lived up to that word. I mean, like I know before, he's been in campus, I think about 5 or 6 times since probably last springtime.
Yeah.
So he's now that he's actually committed, visit twice this month. He's going to come back for the spring game, and we know the orange and blue game that's going to have dozens and dozens of priority targets. So he's definitely putting in the work. We'll see where the class stands, come December. But right now, off to a good start, number 3 in the on 3 rankings. So you definitely can't complain about that.
Just before we get back to the info from Corey, I wanted to answer a question that I've gotten a ton. How can we support? All right. Well, you can obviously subscribe, like, and comment. All of those things really help support the channel. But if you want to do a little more, you can join the channel as a member. You'll get access to special perks, early releases, insight on the program, giveaways, and more. For less than a pitcher of beer at Grog House, may you rest in peace, you can sign up today. I'll link it above and in the description. All right, next up, Michigan State cornerback commit Jamari Howard. He was on campus earlier this week. I saw he was also visiting Florida State this week as well. Do you think maybe he's not quite as solid to Michigan State as as they would like? And where do you think UF stands with him?
Yeah, I think right now it's a Florida State type thing. I know he's still committed to Michigan State. He says all the right things. Obviously loves their whole coaching staff and some of the guys they put in the league in recent years too. But I think when it comes down to it, I think he stays in Florida. If not in the state of Florida, definitely in the Southeast. Florida and Florida State, I think, are definitely the two biggest players right now for his commitment. I know Florida feels pretty confident right now. They knocked it out of the park when they had him on campus last week. But when I asked Jamari himself, it's the first time I spoke to him, and I said, did you like any schools growing up? Did you have a childhood favorite school? And before I can even finish, he said FSU. And, he was really excited about that offer when it came. He was in Tallahassee. Sure. So I think right now it's tough. I'd probably give FSU maybe the slight edge over Florida. It's very, very close, like a coin flip. But as far as Michigan State, I think they just have to keep getting on campus. Proximity is not really in their favor when it comes. I mean, maybe if you want officials, then you take your official. But, yeah, I think right now Florida and Florida State, they're going to keep getting him on campus, and that's how I think it's going to play out. He's going to stay put in the state of Florida.
All right, sticking with FSU and UF battles, Jalewis Solomon, he is nearly a top 200 athlete according to On3. Two-way player. On3 has Florida State as his leader, but also UF and UGA kind of right in there. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, it's kind of. I think his recruitment is more open than maybe people think. I think he's considering a lot of schools. I really feel like he is kind of open to a lot of schools right now. I know Georgia. You can't look far past them. I know Zayden Walker, his younger brother. He's a 5-star edge in the 2025 class. Okay. I know with Solomon, Georgia really likes him, but there's a few others higher on their board right now. So it's kind of like a wait and see where Georgia is. But I think, like you noted, FSU is obviously in high regard with him. Florida as well. A lot of the SEC schools, a lot of Southeast schools are really on his short list. So I think his recruitment is going to be a wait and see. It's going to play out for much of the year. I think Georgia, the X factor, where they kind of view him is kind of because the thing is, Zayden Walker is a top 5 kid regardless of position. So It might be one of those things. Well, hey, we might have a few guys higher on the board, but we'll take him. That way, we can have a package deal type situation. So his recruitment's kind of a wait and see. That's how I view it. But I think FSU, Florida, and Georgia, those are 3 of the main schools for sure.
Now that Raymond has taken over the entire secondary, do you think that that's going to have an impact on this recruitment?
I think it will to a certain degree, and also Florida is mentioning receiver to him as well. So they initially liked him as a pure DB, and now they're mentioning wide receiver. So I think honestly with all these kids, the Corey Raymond effect is real with a lot of them. Obviously they rave about him, and understandably so. But I think with Solomon, they're really kind of viewing him as a true athlete, and I know there's some other staff members too involved with his recruitment. So we'll see. I think it definitely really helps. Definitely doesn't hurt Florida's chances with him.
All right, another state of Florida battle here. Chance Robinson, 4-star wide receiver out of Fort Lauderdale. Miami, Florida, Florida State are all kind of involved here. How do you think UF could do with him?
So before Kerry Colbert went to NFL, Florida, that was a school he raved about. From 3 to 4 staff members always recruiting him day in and day out. That comfort level is really high. It was about just visiting campus. Once Kerry Colbert left, he was one of the kids that said, hey, that really impacts my recruitment a lot. I just got to see who they bring in. But from what we were told over the weekend and after talking to Chance too, Florida really knocked out of the park with them. Same with the resume of Billy Gonzalez. Really learned more about him. Thought he was very genuine. They just really connected. It was really effortless. So and he was another one too. When we talked to him in Orlando, he mentioned DJ Lagway. He's like, hey, that's like the number one thing with me right now. They have such a good quarterback. And that's a wide receiver's dream. So I think right now Florida definitely made up a lot of ground. Like you mentioned, you have Miami and Florida State too. When we spoke to him a few weeks ago, he said Auburn, Ole Miss, and Georgia were the 3 schools that are more likely going to get officials. So when you look at that in the in-state schools, I think it's probably around top 6, top 8. His recruitment's still pretty open. But Florida really did a great job over the weekend and definitely helped their chances overall.
Definitely makes me feel old to hear, recruits say that they don't really know a whole lot about Billy Gonzalez or his resume because, I'm from the era where Billy Gonzalez was always a top recruiter on the staff and everybody wanted to play for him. So that definitely, I feel like, ages me there.
I'm right there with you.
Let's take a look at a hometown kid, Kendall Jackson. He's from Gainesville. Is he maybe UF's to lose? Four-star defensive lineman according to On3, and you guys have him at 97% to UF. So should we be on commitment watch?
Yeah, I'd be at this point. I'd be shocked if he didn't end up at Florida. Obviously his uncle played at Florida. His mother attended the university. Lives in Gainesville. He's one of those kids. He'll never say Florida's the leader because he's. I think everyone thinks his recruitment is so easy. Everyone thinks, hey, you're going to go to Florida. We know you're
Right.
grateful for all these offers, but you're a Gator. But he'll always be like, no, I'm open to all schools. And
Yeah.
I mean, he's showing that he's visiting all these different schools. But when it comes down to it, I think it'd be a major shocker if he didn't end up at Florida. Was there this past weekend again. I think he's maybe a dozen times he's visited as a recruit in the past year. So
Yeah.
that comfort level's high. I think it's gonna be a commitment that kind of comes out of left field, maybe on a visit in the heat of the moment type thing. But I think Florida fans don't really have much to worry about right now.
Let's do one 2025 kid before we get out of here. Five-star safety, DJ Pickett. He's from Zephyr Hills, Florida. Obviously, a long way to go with this one, but do you think we may see another UF FSU battle here as well?
I think so. I know his mother attended Michigan too, so Michigan's a school to really kind of keep an eye out for. His recruitment's pretty wide open as well. I mean, he's the number one safety in the country. Really is going from coast to coast visiting schools. So I think his recruitment's a little bit more open. You have Ohio State as well. He's really kind of has a national recruitment, not really just sticking to the southeast. But
Right.
Florida's in a really good spot. Florida State, Miami, all the in-state schools. But Michigan's the one I'm keeping an eye on. He's been up there a lot, and having that connection with his mother, having attended there, is a big thing as well.
So, is there anyone else that you think Gator fans should know about that on campus this week or this weekend?
Yeah, I think for this weekend, I mean, I think tomorrow you have Jake Garanera. He's an offensive lineman at Ponte Vedra Beach. He's a kid. It's Michigan. I mean, Michigan, Florida State. You got Florida, Penn State. A lot of schools going after him. He's visiting for 2 days, so I thought that's very key. Getting him on campus again, he's a priority recruit for them. He's a guy to really kind of keep an eye out for. I mean, you have guys like Kevin Levy too. He's a kid out of South Florida. He's a safety. One of Corey Raymond's top targets. He grew up a huge Florida fan. I think that's another FSU Florida battle, but I think that Corey Raymond effect that's really big with him, and it's the dream school. So those are two guys I'm really keeping an eye on right now that could pop sooner than later.
All right, so I've asked a couple of people their thoughts on the spring game being on a Thursday, and I understand the idea of trying to stand out, recruiting wise, but as someone who covers the team daily, what are your overall thoughts about the game being on a Thursday instead of a Saturday?
It's interesting. So I think there's two ways to look at it. I think having it on a Thursday, the hard part is kids are back in school at that time. So that's the difficult part when it comes to kind of getting kids from out of state on campus for a Thursday. The positive I like about it, you're separate from everyone else. So that Saturday, I assume there's probably spring games all across the country.
Right.
So you have to pick and choose where you want to go. Florida can kind of separate themselves. I mean, last year's turnout was great. So if you want to look at kind of just the results of what's happened, they hosted like 300 kids last year. So they got the kids on campus, but I just think for out of state kids, when you're a national brand like Florida, it's going to be tough, getting these kids out of school and hey, can you come down and flights and all that. So it's you can look at it two different ways, but I'm going to lean towards it's a good thing just based off how last year was because it was a tremendous result with how many kids were on campus.
Well, Corey, we appreciate you coming on today. Tell people where they can find your work.
Yeah, it's GatorsOnline.com, part of the On3 network. And then same thing with our Twitter, at GatorsOnline. And then for me, it's just Corey, Corey_Bender. And that's my Twitter account. And we're always pumping out updates. So if you're a Florida fan, definitely stay tuned.
Well, we appreciate you. Let's do this again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Big thanks to Corey Bender from Gators Online for joining me. We have another video that is all about UF working to flip one of Florida State's top commitments in the 2024 class. That is available right now to members only. If you don't want to wait, you can join now by clicking the link above or down in the description so you can see Corey's prediction. If you missed our video on how Billy Napier proved the UF culture that he is building, click right here.